love you.
There are moments in life that split a person in two. Moments when the world you thought you lived in suddenly collapses, leaving you standing in the ruins of everything familiar. Trauma does this, quietly sometimes, violently other times. But in nearly every case, it leaves behind a person who is no longer who they were. Some disappear inward, some become brittle and numb, and then there are others, the ones this video is about, who emerge from trauma with something unexpected, a profound, almost spiritual depth, a hunger for meaning, a sensitivity to the unseen, a feeling that life is not just material, but symbolic, mysterious, and deeply interconnected. You may have seen this in others, or you may have felt it in yourself. Carl Jung spent decades trying to understand why certain individuals, after experiencing suffering, loss, or psychological fragmentation, become more spiritually attuned, not less. And his answer reaches into the deepest layers of the human psyche. This video explores that transformation, that strange alchemy of trauma turning into spirituality, and why, for some people, suffering becomes the gateway into a more meaningful life. 1. Trauma and the collapse of the old self. Most people think of trauma as something that breaks a person. Jung agreed, but he also saw something else. He wrote that trauma is a psychic injury that tears open the personality, not just the body, not just the mind, but the entire structure of who you believe yourself to be. When the familiar identity collapses, when the ordinary life map burns to ash, a person is left facing a vast internal emptiness. Everything that once felt stable, beliefs, behaviors, social masks, suddenly feels inadequate. Some respond with denial, others with anger, but some people begin to ask deeper questions. If the world can fall apart so easily, what am I really? If everything outside me can be taken away, what remains inside me? What is the meaning of my suffering? These questions are not just psychological, they are spiritual. Jung believed that trauma, when it destabilizes the outer personality, exposes the deeper layers of the psyche, the unconscious, the symbolic, and the archetypal. And this exposure can awaken a spiritual sensitivity that wasn't active before. It's as if the shock knocks a person below their everyday consciousness into a deeper stratum of the soul. You may have felt this yourself, that after a major loss or crisis, the usual concerns of life suddenly feel trivial. That something in you begins searching for meaning, for understanding, for connection to something greater. It's not weakness, it's an awakening. 2. Jung's core idea. Trauma awakens the numinous. Jung used a powerful word to describe profound spiritual experience, the numinous, the sense of encountering something greater than the ego. For many people, trauma creates a tear in the psychological fabric through which the numinous leaks in. This is why some individuals suddenly develop intense intuition, vivid dreams, symbolic thinking, mystical experiences, fascination with religion or mythology, a sense that life is guiding them. a pull toward meditation, prayer, or inner exploration. The person doesn't choose spirituality. Spirituality chooses them. Jung famously said, "The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not?" Trauma can make that question unavoidable. When everything finite, relationships, identity, health, stability, collapses, the soul instinctively reaches for something infinite, something that cannot be taken away. For some, this becomes religion. For others, meditation. For others still, a private inner journey, the path of individuation. But the common thread is this: trauma opens the door to the numinous. 3. Why not everyone becomes spiritual after trauma? It's important to recognize that not everyone becomes more spiritual after suffering. Many become cynical, fearful, closed off. So why do some transform? Jung believed it depends on the relationship between the ego and the unconscious. He said that spiritual awakening occurs when 1. The ego is destabilized but not destroyed. Trauma weakens the rigid identity, allowing deeper material to emerge, but the personality must remain functional enough to integrate it. 2. The person has a naturally intuitive or reflective temperament. Some individuals are already inclined toward introspection, symbolism, or imagination. Trauma amplifies this. 3. The unconscious pushes forward symbolic material to heal. Dreams, spiritual imagery, visions, or synchronicities begin to compensate for the injured psyche. 4. The person is open to meaning, not just survival. Many trauma responses are about coping, but some people seek understanding. They want to make sense of pain, and meaning seeking is inherently spiritual. 5. The trauma breaks a false self. This is a major point. Many people live behind social masks, roles, or identities that are too small for their true nature. Trauma shatters that shell, allowing a more authentic self to emerge. Jung often observed that individuals with deep spiritual potential frequently experience early life wounds. Not because trauma is good, but because it forces the inner world open. 4. The breakdown of the ego, a spiritual gateway. Jung believed the ego is like the shell of a seed. It protects, organizes, and gives structure, but if it never breaks, nothing can grow. Trauma is one of the ways the ego cracks open. This breakdown creates what Jung called psychic permeability, a state in which the boundaries between conscious and unconscious become more fluid. In this state, a person begins to feel symbolic meanings behind events, strong intuition, emotional connection to universal human experiences, a sense of inner guidance, increased empathy, a pull toward depth psychology, religion, myth, or philosophy. This is not delusion. It's the psyche expanding beyond its former limits. When the ego loses control, the deeper self, the organizing center of the psyche, steps forward. To Jung, spiritual awakening after trauma was not a miracle. It was a natural psychological process. The collapse of the ego reveals the self. 5. How trauma forces a confrontation with the shadow. Every trauma brings us face to face with the shadow, the parts of ourselves we prefer not to see. Fear, helplessness, anger, grief, vulnerability, rage, despair. Most of the time, people avoid the shadow. They stay busy, distracted, or numb. But trauma makes avoidance impossible. When the shadow rises, it brings with it not just darkness, but also energy, untapped potential, creativity, intuition, and spiritual insight. Jung believed the shadow guards the gateway to transformation. Many spiritual traditions echo this idea. You must pass through the darkness to reach the light. People who become spiritual after trauma often describe a period of deep inner confrontation, nightmares, painful introspection, overwhelming emotion, followed by moments of clarity and meaning. It's not linear, it's an initiation. 6. The inner guide, archetypes awakened by suffering. Trauma activates archetypes, deep patterns of human experience stored in the collective unconscious. Jung noted that people who go through suffering often become connected to archetypes like 1. The wounded healer, a person who helps others because they understand pain. 2. The seeker, someone who searches for truth, meaning, or transcendence. 3. The visionary, one who perceives symbolic or mystical connections. 4. The sage, a person who develops wisdom beyond their years. 5. The phoenix, the symbol of rebirth, destruction, paving the way for renewal. These archetypes give a person inner direction. Dreams become more vivid, symbolic images appear, intuition sharpens. It's as if the psyche is saying, your old life is over, this is the path now. And the person follows it, not out of choice, but out of necessity. 7. Numinous experiences after trauma. Many individuals report numinous or spiritual experiences after trauma. Sudden spiritual visions, dreams that feel like messages, synchronicities, overwhelming moments of peace or unity, near-death experiences, a sense of presence or guidance, symbolic patterns appearing in everyday life. Jung did not see these as hallucinations. He saw them as the psyche reorganizing itself. The unconscious communicates in symbols, images, and dreams. During trauma recovery, the barrier between consciousness and unconscious becomes thinner, making these experiences more frequent. Some people mistake this for going crazy, but Jung believed they are signs of inner healing, the psyche trying to restore balance. 8. Why spirituality helps heal trauma. Spirituality, in Jung's view, is not about belief, it's about relationship. The relationship between the ego and the deeper self. People who become spiritual after trauma often experience 1. A sense of meaning. Suffering becomes part of a larger story, not a meaningless event. 2. Reduction of fear. The person feels connected to something greater than themselves. 3. Emotional resilience. Spirituality provides tools for integrating painful experiences. 4. Identity reconstruction. The old self has died, a new self takes its place. 5. Connection. To others, to humanity, to nature, to the universe. 6. Hope. Not naive optimism, but a belief in inner growth. Spirituality gives shape to the chaos. 9. Individuation. The spiritual path born from wounding. Jung believed that the purpose of life is individuation, becoming who you truly are. Trauma often becomes the starting point for this journey. Not because suffering is necessary, but because it forces a person to confront the parts of themselves they've ignored. People who become spiritual after trauma often describe feeling guided towards self-discovery, recognizing patterns in their behavior, uncovering their authentic values, seeing through societal expectations, embracing aspects of themselves they once denied, developing compassion for the suffering of others, discovering inner creativity or intuition, realizing that life is symbolic, not just literal. Trauma strips away illusions. What remains is the beginning of the real inner journey. 10. When spirituality becomes a coping mechanism and when it becomes transformation. Not all spiritual development after trauma is healthy. Jung warned of spiritual bypassing, using spirituality to avoid dealing with pain. Signs include pretending to be above emotions, denying anger, grief, or fear, clinging to spiritual beliefs to avoid reality, confusing intuition with wishful thinking, avoiding responsibility for one's healing. This is not transformation, it's avoidance. True spiritual awakening involves facing the shadow, feeling the pain, integrating the experience, becoming more grounded, not less. Jung believed real spiritual growth makes a person more human, not less. Not detached from life, but engaged with it. Not floating above suffering, but understanding it. 11. The deeper reason. Trauma pushes us toward the self. At the core of Jung psychology is this idea: the self, the true, deeper center of your being, wants to be realized. Most people stay at the surface of life. Trauma forces them downward, inward, deeper. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Suffering is not the path, but it is often the catalyst. Trauma cracks open the personality enough for the self to enter. This contact feels spiritual because it is spiritual, the psyche connecting with its own depths. When you feel guided after trauma, when you feel meaning returning, when you feel a symbolic intelligence at work, Jung would say, you are encountering the self. 1. The loss. A person loses someone close. Grief strips away their identity. Suddenly, they feel drawn to meditation, books on the afterlife, or dreams that seem to carry messages. They begin to feel the presence of meaning again. 2. The breakdown. Someone has a severe crisis, panic attacks, depression, or burnout. At the bottom, they find something unexpected, a calm inner voice guiding them toward recovery. 3. The survivor. After an accident or near-death experience, a person senses that life has depth. Natural beauty feels sacred. Connections feel intentional. They become less interested in material concerns and more focused on purpose. These stories are universal because the psyche behaves in predictable patterns. Trauma breaks the surface. The self rises through the cracks. Spiritual growth after trauma needs grounding. Jung emphasized 3 tools. 1. Self-reflection, journaling, contemplation, therapy, analysis. 2. Symbolic understanding, interpreting dreams, noticing synchronicities, studying mythology. 3. Embodiment, living the insights in daily life, healthy boundaries, new habits, authenticity, purpose. Without integration, spirituality becomes chaos. With integration, it becomes transformation. People who undergo this journey often emerge calmer, wiser, more intuitive, more compassionate, more aligned with purpose, less afraid, more attuned to symbolism, more connected to others, more authentic, more humble. They are not perfect, but they are deeper. Jung believed these individuals are often the healers, the creators, the guides, and the teachers of society. Not because they were chosen, but because they survived and transformed. Not everyone becomes spiritual after trauma, but for some, perhaps for you, suffering becomes the beginning of depth. It opens the door between the conscious mind and the unconscious. It activates archetypes. It awakens intuition. It reveals the numinous. It forces the ego to surrender, allowing the self to emerge. Jung never glorified trauma, but he understood its strange power. He believed that inside every wound is a path, not to perfection, but to wholeness. And for some people, that path becomes a spiritual one. Life breaks them open, and the soul steps through the cracks. If this video resonated with you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into Jungian psychology, the unconscious, and the search for meaning. Thank you for watching, and remember, your suffering does not define you, but what you create from it might.